Good evening and welcome to the Monday, January 28th, 2013 meeting of the Glendale Transportation and Parking Commission. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Wiseman,
Here.
Commissioner Sahakian, Commissioner Yakubian,
Here.
Commissioner Mangasarian,
Here.
Chairperson Fuad.
Here. Let's now salute our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next item, please.
Item 2 on the agenda is the posting of the agenda. The agenda for the Monday, January 28th, 2013 regular meeting of the Glendale Transportation and Parking Commission was posted by Friday, January 25th, 2013 before 5:30 p.m. on the bulletin board outside of City Hall.
Next item, please.
Item 3 is approval of minutes. Item 3A, December 17, 2012 special meeting.
Have we, fellow members, had a chance to review those minutes? Any comments?
No.
Comments.
I guess do we approve them by motion or? Yeah. Do I hear a motion to approve?
I'll do motion to approve.
Second.
I guess we take a vote, or they're just approved. Okay, they're deemed approved. Fine. Next item, please. Go ahead.
Item 4 is oral communication. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. The commission may question the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision.
I don't have any cards for the oral communication. We have, or do we? Sorry. We have quite a number of cards for the agenda item. Margaret Hammond, please.
Commissioners. My name is Margaret Hammond. Now I'm here to talk at oral about the parking, for instance, on Adams Hill and in that area down there where we're completely compacted with cars, partially due to people illegally renting in the R1 area. And they have, instead of one family, there's 2 or 3, and therefore, and they have parking on the street. It's a very old area. It's tropical. A lot of the homes have 1-car garages, no driveways. I know it sounds impossible, but they have no driveways. The 3 homes across from me have no driveways to speak of. Therefore, they all park on the street, and there's only parking on one side of the street. So you have no idea. And people get into fights and arguments, and it's disgusting because they can't help it. They want to go to what they think is their homes, even though they may be there illegally. Something must be done about the parking in that area. There's just no way that it can continue, whether we need to have permit parking or whatever needs to be proposed in that area. I know many of my neighbors talk about it, but none of them come as usual. They do a lot of talking, but they don't do the talking to the right people. So I'm here this evening, well, I'm here on the other subject also, but I do want to say we really need some kind of action about the parking on the streets and also the traffic that goes up over Cypress. They think it's a freeway, a speedway. They go up over that thing. You can't even get in or out of your car. Lickety split, and if there were cars parked on both sides of the street, I don't know what would happen. There have been several accidents. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you. Mike Mulhill.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. My name is Mike Mulhill. I'd like to talk about the problems with parking in South Glendale, which is now creeping up to North Glendale, too, towards the 134 freeway. We have Salem Street, high density of population. The City Council approves multiple housing and other parts of the city. And now we have competition between residential and multiple housing and businesses and this commission approves property with insufficient amount of parking. Builders want variances to save money. The people who live in the area that's being impacted have to fight for parking. Was this the vision of Glendale? This commission makes recommendations, if I understand, to the city council. What will this commission be recommending to the city council with parking, the major concern of South Glendale? And we have more development going on in South Glendale. Are we going to approve more variances? Why are we allowing tandem parking in South Glendale? Why don't we have a higher ratio of parking in the commercial buildings, in the multiple apartments? It goes on and on. Who speaks for the people who already live in South Glendale? Does the commission speak for the people in South Glendale? I don't think the city council speaks for the people, because they approve these large housing projects for the benefit of not the people, but for the city employees who need the money for their pensions and their salaries. And that's why we have the problem in South Glendale with multiple housing, no parking, and it all revolves around money. And I hope this commission can step forward and speak for the people of South Glendale and not for the developers or the city unions who need the money. Thank you. My name is Mike Mohill.
Thank you. Mario Recru, I can't quite read the writing. Please state your name for the record.
Yes, my name is Mario Recchio. I'm at 128 West Maple. I'm trying to request a handicap at the corner at Maple and Central, because there's one at Brand on South, I think South, and so they need, if I could get another one for North on Maple and Central for handicap space.
You're asking us?
Right.
Maybe the staff can help us. I think there's a place to go to request that.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, you are welcome to provide your information to staff, and we'll look into it and get back to you.
Okay. And also, with safety, a speed bump at Maple Street, West Maple, Brandon Central, because there's cars are speeding there for the safety issue.
Again, there's also a procedure for getting speed bumps, and when you're talking to staff, you can explore with them how you go about doing that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no more cards for oral communications, I'm sorry? Did you have a card? Or well, come on up. We'll. Did you submit a card? Maybe it's lost in the rubble.
Yeah, that's okay. You'll find it.
State your name for the record.
Thank you. My name is Deborah Dentler. Good evening, commissioners, staff, and members of the public. I'm a longtime resident of Glendale. My husband and I raised 3 children in Glendale. I've been here since 1989, resident and a homeowner and a professional in the community. I'm here today to make sure that the Commission is aware, I'm sure you are, that our City Council will be shortly entertaining an agenda item that was placed on a future agenda, date uncertain, concerning the gun show that takes place at the Civic Auditorium. The reason that I'm here to speak to your commission about it is because some of us who live in the area have concerns about the possible impacts from increased traffic and public participation, and also media presence that is likely and should be anticipated will occur on the day of the next upcoming gun show, which is scheduled for March 2nd and 3rd. It's a weekend. The City Council may or may not take any action before the March 2nd gun show concerning the ordinance that it will be apparently considering. We don't know when that ordinance will be prepared for the council's consideration, but it's important that our city prepare now for the gun show, which will likely go ahead on March 2nd. And the reason I've come today to this commission is to make sure that the commission and staff have been following the news reports about the level of attendance and its consequent parking and traffic problems that have occurred in the most recent gun shows in counties adjacent to ours, and those would be the gun shows in Ontario on the weekend of January 5, and the most recent one, the gun show at the Orange County Fairgrounds, January 26 and 27. I do have some news clippings concerning these gun shows. And what was found was that the gun shows attracted enormous crowds, far in excess of what had been the case previously. So although our gun show here in Glendale has a long history of, I gather, being problem-free, which is a good thing for our community, we need to plan ahead to anticipate the possible problems and impacts on traffic and parking and public safety, litter, et cetera, if we have an enormous surge in attendance. For instance, at the recent gun show at the Orange County Fairgrounds, what had normally been in the past an attendance of 10 to 14,000 swelled this past weekend to 25,000. People began arriving to get into the doors at 3 a.m. Similarly, at the Ontario gun show on January 5, the crowd levels swelled well beyond what had historically taken place there. The Ontario gun shows has taken place, I think, for decades. And with the result that people were literally camping out virtually the night before in order to be able to arrive at the gun show when the doors opened. Now, our gun show here in Glendale, I have the contract with me. It's a city document. The gun show is planning to open its doors at 7 a.m. on Saturday, March 2nd, close its doors at 5:30 on Saturday. Then again on Sunday, it opens its doors at 8:30 and closes at 7 p.m. There is a setup day on Friday, and that is from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. As you know, the immediate area around the Civic Auditorium is encircled by quiet residential neighborhoods. There's already a parking and traffic impact because of the college. There are also parks right adjacent. It will be hopefully pleasant spring weather. We have a skateboard park. We have Nibley Park, Verdugo Park. The college does have classes on Saturday, and its library, I believe, is open on weekends. So there are a lot of adjacent places where activities could be taking place. As you may know, there's a swap meet also at the college. I don't know if it's planned for that same weekend. But the convergence of all of these activities and the heightened media attention that is likely to converge on our city on that weekend with the trucks, news cameras, looky-loos, it's really important that the commission make sure that staff has a good planning process underway. So on behalf of residents concerned about the potential impact of the gun show, I'd ask that the commission direct staff to put together a good comprehensive plan for managing the impacts. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Congratulations. This is what I call a very informed citizen. Thank you for doing your homework. I'd just like to ask the staff if they have looked into the situation.
Commissioner Mangasarian, my concern is, and I was aware of the surge in numbers, and we're not talking 1,000, 1,500. We're talking double in numbers. Ontario was a mess. Orange County was a mess. I just want to ensure that if it's going to be our police department or there's a requirement in the special event permitting process that requires the event organizer I'd like to see them reimburse the city, obviously, if we're going to send staff out there for 2 days, all day long to manage traffic. I'd like to see either a report, I know we don't have much time, I'd like to see a plan to address this concern. I'm concerned, I live in the Ross Moines area.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, and Commissioners Mangasarian and Sahakian, as you probably know, we do have a process for applying and obtaining special events permit. I have not seen it yet, but we do route it through the police department, our traffic bureau, enforcement, as well as our traffic engineers, and we will take a closer look because of the situation and make sure that the proper traffic control elements are put in place.
Most probably the existing contract doesn't have any requirements in it because so far it's been manageable. It's the surge, so there is a change in conditions at this time. And that's a concern of obviously the residents.
I do have a copy of the contract with me, and it's easily obtainable from the city. I'm an attorney, and I've read it very carefully, although you don't have to be an attorney to read it. It's very simple. It's the same contract year in, year out, essentially, I think. And even though there have not been, to my knowledge, although I certainly have no expertise, gun shows happened here for decades, I believe, without incident. But we should be planning ahead for the swell in traffic and the attendant parking and other problems. The contract does provide for security, but I'm sorry, I haven't been
We
the
shouldn't go on
chair.
too long about this for an unagendized item.
If I could just mention one thing concerning the contract, would that be okay?
Go ahead.
Thank you so much. The contract, just for your information, Commissioner, does provide for security to be provided by the gun show operator, not by the city of Glendale. But the contract language only calls for those security guards to be present 1/2 hour before doors open, and they are able to leave 1/2 hour after doors close. And maybe that was fine for past gun shows, but I think this one is likely to require some planning and some staffing up as early as 2 or 3 in the morning. Thank you. And I do have a copy of the contract if anyone would like to see it.
Go ahead, Mr.
Martin?
Do you have
Who's
anything
going
more?
first?
Do you have anything more?
Again, I just want to make it clear that the concern is the traffic in the residential neighborhoods. The surge, obviously, we might not have enough parking at the college. That weekend there are other events in the area as well. What I'm going to suggest is a meeting with the event organizer, discussing what happened in Ontario and in Orange County, maybe calling Ontario and Orange County to see how they addressed it, if it was a police function. Security, they don't do traffic control. We know that. They're probably on the premises, and that's another issue for the police commission to look into. But as far as traffic, either we're going to have our motor units out there enforcing illegal parking or doing traffic control at the major intersections.
Thank you. Kara Sargile? Sergio.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. Nice to see you all, and Happy New Year. My name is Kara Sergio. Most of you know me as the sort of parent champion consultant for the City of Glendale's Safe Routes to School program. But today I'm actually here in the same capacity as Deborah. I'm a resident of the Ross Moines community. I live literally just around the corner from the Civic Auditorium, and I've been in the neighborhood for 12 years. And I've seen historically what the regular gun show has, what happens in the neighborhood when the regular gun show is in town. So I'm also very concerned about what the impact is going to be with this new surge. I see participants for the gun show parking all the way up and down Royal, on Ethel, on Moncado Drive, which is my street, and all the surrounding streets in that area. Right now, we do have preferential parking, but that's only during the work week to keep the school, the Glendale Community College students from parking in our neighborhood. But there's no restriction on the weekend. So I'm very, very concerned about the impact on our neighborhood with the increased cars, people from out of the area, and the trash. I've seen litter be a problem after the gun shows or other big events occur at the Civic Auditorium. That's all. I just want to encourage you, as RM and others have said, to just make sure that we have a very good, solid, proactive plan. So thank you.
Mr. Chair, I've seen this done at the Hollywood Bowl. You cannot enforce it, but they do put up signs at the local residential streets that read, and these are the changeable message signs, that read no event parking. Now, they're not enforceable, obviously, but about the parking dropped 30 to 40% in those residential areas. And I know often you guys place changeable message signs at the corner of Glendale and Mountain, I believe, at the northwest corner, something similar to that maybe.
Thank you. And I think our final oral communication speaker is Roland Doltz.
Good evening. My name is Roland Doltz, and I was here 2 weeks ago in the City Council meeting to discuss the traffic issue. I'm here for the agenda tonight, but I wanted to also come up here and share some of the issues that I'm having. The problem that you're about to have because of this show, I have every single day on Maple Street on the 200 block. Every day, 7 days a week. So does any one of you live on Maple, so there's an interest for Maple Street so they can address the issue? Because I'm a resident, I own the property, and it's a nightmare. You have 3 businesses that affect the 200 block of Maple 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You have the LA Fitness, you have the building 710 South Central that houses a Social Security office, and it houses the State Board for barbering and cosmetology testing. So that means 7 days a week you have LA Fitness, and 5 out of the 7 you have those 3 businesses. Also on the 300 block, which is west of Central, that street on Maple is permit parking, which means it pushes all those people into the 200 block. Now I'm here for the agenda, and I have a piece of paper that I have to go do myself on my block and get all the residents to sign to see if we can get permit parking. I came in front of the city council meeting and I pleaded to please address this issue. Now, none of you live there, so I'm pleading once more again, please address this problem. It is a nightmare on that 200 block. I don't see any police officer watching that street. I live there. I am currently not working. I had surgery, so I'm off of work. I have yet to see an officer travel that street. And they're speeding up and down that street. On the west side of Maple Street, sometimes the traffic backs up all the way almost to Brand. I can't even pull out of my driveway because the traffic is so bad. So, does the city, are they aware of what's going on? Is that why I spoke with Mr. Jeff here? They send me this, so I have to do the legwork to get my neighbors to sign for this thing so I can hopefully get permit parking.
Well, hopefully tonight's presentation and South Bend parking will help address your issues. So we can go through that, and you can come up.
But I have to get signatures from the residents, sir, and I think it's like 60%. And they're mostly rentals. So I have to do the footwork for a nightmare that I haven't created. Okay? And now you have Metropole, which is about to open, which is a banquet hall. So the nightmare is going to continue till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Now, you guys give out the permits for this. I mean, do I have to get one of you to live on Maple to address this problem? I live there. I pay taxes. And you have the problem also on Brand Boulevard with all the car dealerships, sir.
Mr. Dultz, we
Yes.
hear you. We hear you. We can't really
Right.
discuss this during oral communications.
Right.
We'll discuss it during the South Bend parking
Okay.
discussion. Thank you. We have another oral communications. Kevin Shin. Please come forward and state your name.
Good evening, Commissioner. I received the letter from City of Glendale regarding some issue related to a southern part of parking in the southern part of Glendale. So I thought it is a good time to come here to present.
Mr. Shin, we're going to, if I may interrupt you, we're going to be discussing this plan.
Pardon?
We're going to be discussing this plan next. Maybe it's more appropriate for you to speak later in the evening after we've discussed the plan. If you're here for the parking.
Yeah, parking.
I think it'd be better. Why don't you come back after? I mean, it's up to you, but you can come back after we discuss it, and then we can more fully address your issues then. Oral communications really isn't the place to adjust.
When do I come back?
Well, no, stay here this evening, but as the evening goes on.
Oh, okay.
So I'll move your card back into the pile so you can speak
okay.
during the agenda item, if that's okay with you.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, excellent, thank you. For done oral communications, next item, please.
Item 5, action item at 5A is the report regarding ordinance amending Glendale Municipal Code Title 10.36 for preferential parking. At 5A1 is the motion to recommend proposed ordinance to City Council.
I believe staff has a report on this item.
Chairman Fuad, if I may interrupt or interject, I will have to recuse myself tonight from this discussion. I have an interest in a real property that's located in the subject area of discussion tonight for this municipal code title, 10.36. It's a extremely passionate issue. I had a lot of ideas. Unfortunately, for purposes of no conflict of interest, I will have to recuse myself from discussion.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, the item before you is to review the proposed changes to the draft ordinance amending Title 10.36 of the Glendale Municipal Code regarding preferential parking in the South Brand Boulevard Special Parking District only. This was previously presented to you on August 27, 2012, and we have incorporated the feedback received into the changes we're proposing tonight. Staff has prepared a PowerPoint presentation in two parts. In the first part, Mr. Mike Nilsson, our mobility planner, will go over the background and the community outreach efforts we have conducted. And in the second part, Mr. Tad Dombrowski, our parking manager, will go over the details of the proposed revision to preferential parking in the district. And then we are available alongside me is the Assistant City Attorney, Bobby Aldesco, and myself, alongside with the staff, available to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Well, let's go to the presentation.
Good afternoon, members of the Transportation and Parking Commission. My name is Mike Nilsson. I'm the mobility planner with the City of Glendale. And the purpose of tonight's presentation is for members of the TPC to review the draft ordinance amending Title 1036 of the Glendale Municipal Code, and as well as improving a motion recommending the proposed ordinance to City Council for adoption. I also want to state for the record that in the staff report, we accidentally left out a regulation proposed for the South Brand Special Permit District. We are proposing a 2-hour, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. parking regulation, except by permit in the special South Brand permit area. So,
did you say 7 days a week?
No, Monday through Saturday. So I just want to add that to the record. We had that as part of our staff recommendations for the last several staff reports. We just happened to leave it out accidentally this time. Some background on the South Brand Special Preferential Parking District. The South Brand area is an economically vibrant area with a mix of uses, including the Brand Boulevard of cars. Also contains 250 small businesses, as well as a mix of multifamily and single-family residential areas. Responding to the complaints regarding parking in the area, TPC directed staff in February 2010 to prepare a comprehensive solution to modify preferential parking in the area, resolving street parking issues based on research of actual street occupancies in the neighborhood, and for staff to come up with specific solutions to remedy these issues. The ordinance being presented tonight modifies preferential parking in the neighborhood to ensure the continued success of Brand Boulevard of Cars as a regional auto center while improving the quality of life for adjacent residents, with an emphasis of looking on-street parking as a public resource that serves all constituents. In regards to the study area that we're looking at tonight, it's approximately bound by Colorado Street to the north, Glendale Avenue to the east, San Fernando Road to the south, and Central Avenue to the west. With providing an ordinance that aims to resolve parking issues for businesses and residents alike, the draft ordinance being presented tonight reflects input received over the past 2 years in 15 community outreach meetings, and 8 public meetings. This includes meeting with the Brand Boulevard of Cars local residents, residential property managers, the Americana Brand, Glendale Memorial Hospital, and local churches, as well as having public meetings with the Council, Transportation Parking Commission, and Planning Commission. I also would like to add that we sent out over 5,200 mailers to all businesses and residents in the South Brand study area to notify them of this meeting. We've also done this in the past for previous meetings with the Council and Transportation and Parking Commission. In regards to how we developed the recommendations being presented to the Commission tonight, this has been as a result of 2 years of a significant amount of research and outreach, as well as adjustments to the ordinance to better address resident and business concerns, which varied greatly during the process. The aim from the city was to strike a compromise between these interests, as well as best serving both local residents and businesses in the neighborhood. So with that, I'll pass it over to Tad Dombrowski. He's the parking manager for the city of Glendale, and he'll go over the proposed ordinance regarding preferential parking for the South Brand Boulevard neighborhood in greater detail.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'd like to highlight a couple things. The purpose, first off, of creating the special preferential parking district down there. Right now, the existing process is done on a street-by-street basis, and that solves the majority of the problem. About 20 years ago, we had a similar situation up at the college, and at that time, the framework was put in place based on the needs of the students, the school, the residents, everyone in the entire area. The framework was put in place for this is what the preferential parking in the college area will look like going forward. And when you flash forward 20 years, we've had great success with a lot of the program that was put up there, and this is pretty much modeled after that. Some of the things where we're looking at an area that is, this entire South Brand area has so many competing interests with very limited space, and a lot of these proposed changes are things that we looked at the existing structure of what we had, figured out what wasn't working, and tried to tweak it for this specific area. So one of the proposals is to create one standard regulation for all the zones in this area. Currently, if you have a street that you're petitioning for preferential parking for, it's up to you to create what the residents would like and to bring it to staff, who in turn brings it before the TPC. The reality is we should have a consistent policy in place that says these are what the regulations are. Not that we're going to blanket the entire area with those regulations now, but to create the framework so that as people petition for their street to be included as permits and get permits for their street, this is the structure of what it is that they're going to be petitioning for, so that it's very clear, it's consistent for the consumer, regardless of whether they're going to that area to visit a business or visit a residence. The regulations across the zone would all be consistent. So that proposed regulation, as Mike said earlier, is 2 hours, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., Monday through Saturday, except by permit. So permits would be allowed to stay longer than the 2 hour regulation from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. The existing regulations, and this is important because I know we have heard some feedback from Windsor. The existing regulations we are proposing to remain on Windsor as they are now. Windsor was a street where we had at least this many residents, if not more, who came in to petition for theirs, and there was a lot of work and effort put into that street, and for now we'd really like to leave them isolated where they are with the system that is working for them and not have them as part of the overall.
As a matter of interest, what are the current regulations in Windsor?
It is 24/7 preferential parking only. All right, the next slide, Mike.
Mr. Chair, if I may, are we saying that, are we grandfathering Windsor and it stays the same?
Correct.
Any other exceptions to the rule?
Right now, we're looking at leaving all of the preferential parking streets that are within the South Brand area as they are. Most of these are very minor changes that we will probably convert over time to the consistent regulation. Some of them may be Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And so at some point in time in the future, maybe when we replace the signs, we'll send outreach to the residents on that street and add in the Saturday so that it is still a consistent regulation. But the reality is that most of these are very small changes. It may be 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. and we're going to go to 7 to 7. But it'll probably be over time as we phase it in.
Thank you.
The permit approval process. One of the important things in this is simplifying the approval process for the permits as they come in, so that on a street-by-street basis, we don't have to prepare a report and bring it to you each time for each street that wants to do this. We've had significant amount of petitions over the last couple years that have come forward. The area is impacted for parking, as you've heard already, and so currently the petition requires that they provide 75%, and that's very challenging. There are often issues with residents who are with vacant units, for instance, where nobody's living there, so we can't necessarily count that for the petitioner, but we also can't count it against the petitioner. It's one of these weird things. So we're looking, the attached ordinance does clean up some of that language so that we are very clear with how we can deal with vacant units going forward. And likewise, the challenge of 75% of residents on the street. Early on in this process, we had a consultant that came on board and did some occupancy studies in the area to determine the right path to go down. One of the recommendations from the consultant was 75% is what you have currently. You could leave that alone. You could reduce it down to as much as 51% so that you at least have a majority. And we felt that 66% was the best middle ground for that. It really means that you don't have one or two residents on the street that could change their mind and all of a sudden you have a petition that doesn't meet the threshold. So the 66% is you're fairly certain that you have the majority that would like to have this. And then the second part is, now that the framework would be established on what regulation would be put in, it would be very easy for us to go through and do the analysis and verification and then instantly put the preferential parking in place so that we're not waiting for the next TPC commission and waiting for for the same exact process that happens typically in this area with all of the competing interests and going through this each time. So to try and get the preferential permits in place and get some immediate relief to the residents in that area, in the impacted area, we'd like to do this administratively once we receive the petition and verify that the demand is there, that the signatures are there from the residents. One of the other proposed changes is the number of residential parking permits. Currently, throughout the city, we do not have a limit on the number on the number of vehicles that you can have and the number of permits that we can give you. So in some cases where we have an impacted street and the commission has gone through and determined, yes, it's impacted, there's too many vehicles on the street, we then have some residents who are asking for 4, 5, 6, 7 permits for their vehicles and parking them out on the street. And we want to make sure that that's not happening down in the South Brand area. So we've decided that our recommendation would be strictly that we cap it at 3 permits. It seems to be a reasonable number, especially with looking at what we currently have in the system. And there are an isolated few that have more than 3 vehicles for an individual address. It will also help reduce the impacts of one resident on the neighbor next door because all of their cars are parked in the same spaces. The guest parking program, we are recommending some changes. The current citywide practice we have is 2 annual guest permits, which can easily be moved from one vehicle to another. There is some concern in the South Brand area where, and we had this happen up at the college area, where abuse was definitely triggered on the guest permits because they're not tied to a license plate, they're not tied to a vehicle, And so what we're trying to do is create a system in place where it will adequately address the needs of guest parking for the residents in the area and at the same time minimize the potential abuses. So the recommendation now is, instead of 2 annual guest permits, giving 30 free one-time daily permits to the residents in that area. And they can be used anytime. What they would essentially do is write down the date in order for the permit to be valid. And it specifically tells you on the permit, you have to write it in pen, and we've looked at also doing some online. Recently, the preferential parking program was put online so that the residents could go to a website and get their permits annually renewed online. And so we are looking at also offering some other potential possibilities online with the daily permits. After the first 30 permits, they'd then be $2 a piece. So you could continue, and this would be an annual allotment. With the preferential parking times as 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and having the restriction as 2 hours, you really would not need the average person wouldn't need a permit on a regular basis during the week. If you're the resident, you would have your vehicles with their own permit, and you wouldn't be using daily passes or guest passes. With most of the people who are coming to visit, what we've heard is it's all happening in the evening, and anybody who would be arriving after 5 p.m. could stay for the 2 hours and then stay for the rest of the night if they felt like it. So they wouldn't need to put a guest permit in their car. So it really reduces the need for the daily permits to probably Saturdays as the primary time when it would be needed for the residents. This would also eliminate the need for special event permits in the area for each time you have a special event to come in and request this, because you'd have the daily permits in your hand and could use them as you saw fit. For the non-resident permits, in this area we do have several businesses that use the residential streets as overflow parking. The idea behind giving the non-resident permits is that we're actually able to manage the parking better. If the street has preferential parking on it and we realize that it's still full because there's just a high-use street, and even once we put the preferential parking in, then obviously we wouldn't be giving permits to businesses to park on that street. However, there could be a street 2 streets over that in that same zone that has additional capacity. And on that street, you have the bulk of the residents who are working a job during the daytime. They're not at home during the day, and there's excess capacity where we would then be able to issue permits to the businesses for the underutilized time on a different street than the one that's so heavily impacted. So this allows staff to manage that process a little better and react to a lot of the complaints from the residents if they've already gone through the process.
And how often would those be reviewed, analyzed, if it becomes a problem after a period of time with the non-residential permits?
If it becomes a problem, we would obviously be able to review it right away and see and determine how the problem is. Depending on the structure that was set up, we could either look at having annual permits, or we could even look at, with the non-resident permits, setting up a structure where if it creates a problem, we would be able to go back to the business and take those back in a certain amount of time.
You mentioned that the residential permits would be good throughout the zone for which they were issued?
Correct.
What about the non-residential permits? The example you just gave of a street 2 streets away within the same zone?
That is correct. We are looking at probably reducing the non-resident permits to more of a street-by-street nature than the zones that the residents would be able to use.
Okay, thank you.
And more to the first part of his question, when you say it would be good for the zone, is it for the whole zone or one of the numbered subzones, a permit?
For the residents?
The residents.
For the residents, it would be good, the zones that we had up there, the 8 zones that are in there.
Zones.
If you lived in Zone 1, you would have access to Zone 1, which typically would be 4 blocks by 4 blocks.
But not Zone 2.
But you wouldn't have access to Zone 2, correct. The last change that we were looking at making had to do with the fees.
The $6 per permit fee was actually initiated with the college program about 20 years ago. It has not been raised since then. We did a cost recovery study to see how much it was that we were paying on a per permit basis for the existing program, and the permit would need to be about $25 per permit to recover the costs for the preferential parking program.
Now, when you say $25, that's per household or per park, or like if you're entitled to 3?
Per permit.
So it'd be $75 if you wanted to use all 3?
Correct, per year.
Per year, okay.
Yes. Lastly, when we came in August, there were several concerns that the Commission brought up. One of them was the abuse of permits, and we've definitely worked with the contractor that we have on board. They have implemented several control measures in other cities where they work with other cities on the same exact issue. We're trying to find the right blend for Glendale with the needs in this area. Some of them are obviously we have some features such as holograms, number sequences, receipt numbers, watermarking, barcoding. There's a lot of online tools as well, but we are looking now at, for the first time, we just put the application process online so that you're able to go online, log in, and make your request for a permit. So the fact that we've just put that online now, we're trying to gauge exactly how much it would be used. The first year so far, since January, we had about 25% that logged in and did it, as opposed to mailing it or coming down, which was the way it had been done before. So the first year, that's a pretty average rate with how quickly this went out. We didn't force anybody to do this. We didn't say, this is how you should do it. We didn't do anything along those lines. We just tried to market it to the people who would, have a computer at home and be able to log in and do it, and it's quick and easy. And so 25% capture rate, the vendor we use said is pretty reasonable for under those same circumstances. So we definitely want to minimize the abuse in these permits. There were several measures that we've been looking at, and long-term, once we look at how this finally gets adopted and what other pieces we need to consider, we have plenty of different methods that we can use to address any abuse that would be potential in that area. The second one had to do with healthcare permits, and concerns were raised in regards to caretakers. Currently, we have a very minimal number of this. We offer this for any caregivers with our existing program, and if they come in and they show us that, yes, I'm a caregiver for this resident, and we basically issue them a preferential permit just as if they were the resident. So, and we don't spell it out any differently. We verify that they are for that person, and then annually when we look for the renewal, we ask them to re-verify what that process is. But when we looked at the number just randomly of how many people we had gone through this process for, it was less than a dozen for last year. So it's very minimal in comparison with the overall picture. We do have a mechanism in place, and we'll continue to leave that mechanism in place for South Brand so that anybody needing a healthcare permit would be able to get one. And then last case was clarifications of the zones. What we're recommending is that the council would establish these zones for the entire area. However, they would not be changing any of the parking regulations or any of the signs that are out there on the street simply by doing so. This really creates the framework for the regulation that would go in place once the petition process is complete and once the residents have petitioned for these permits to be on their street. That's the important key, is that we're not looking, with doing this, we're not looking at changing any of the existing parking that's out there today. We think this will be a better structure to address the parking concerns and issues that we're obviously having in the South Brand area with some of the people who have already come up and spoken tonight. So with that, what we're looking for is our next steps. We'd like to have some comments from the public and recommendations from the Transportation and Parking Commission on the draft ordinance before going to council sometime in spring, where we'll present them the revised ordinance plus any comments and recommendations for adoption.
That concludes the presentation. We can go to public comment, or if you have any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any preliminary comments before we go to the public?
Yeah, a quick question. Was this presentation presented at the outreach meetings?
The outreach meetings had several different presentations done. A lot of it depended on what groups we were looking at. And the changes that we're recommending tonight have gone through many variations from the time we originally started this. So I can't tell you that these changes, I'm trying to think of one example of this. The 75-66 percentage for the petition process. At one point, we had the consultant on board who was saying we could go as low as 51. So at that time, there were several different versions where we were looking at some of them were, what do you think about 51%? What do you think about leaving it at 75%? And the end result of all of the outreach meetings was that we felt it was best to compromise, put it at 66%, where it's a little easier to get the petitions than it has been in the past, but it's not a simple majority. It really takes understanding that there's a problem out there with two-thirds of the residents. So each of these may have had a slightly different take to it over the tons of outreach meetings that we've had, and some of the components may only be applicable to certain groups in there as well.
So there won't be any surprises?
There should not be any surprises.
Thank you.
Any other?
Mr. Chair, a couple of questions, yes. Within the zone, if you want to terminate preferential parking, we're asking for 75% instead of 66%. And I thought you said that you felt majorities, you feel 66% is okay. Why that?
The language in the ordinance is confusing to me. I've actually had to go over it with Bobby Eldesco several times because the termination clause that's in the ordinance is really to terminate the preferential parking zones. We have to have a trigger mechanism in the ordinance to remove the special preferential parking district in South Brand altogether. That really rests at the council level. If you have a street that you're a resident on and you petition for it, and you get the permits, and something else happens. A business moves away, a multifamily unit that was next to you is demolished to the ground, and now you no longer have parking and wish to remove that parking on your street, it would be the same administrative process for requesting parking. It would be the 66%, and we wouldn't be taking that before the commission. We would just remove that once we got a 66% threshold on the removal.
Definitely the language needs to be changed.
It is very confusing in the ordinance, but it was required to be in the ordinance as a termination clause for the entire district.
Okay. And now, on that subject, I believe the ordinance said that the Director of Belleville Public Works can terminate completely the South Brand Zone preferential district without going through the commission. Am I correct or wrong?
That is on the street by street. If the residents petitioned, got a 66% threshold, and we verified it, then the director would be able to terminate that one street administratively without bringing it back to the TPC or to the city council. The city council, because they would be creating the special preferential parking district in South Brand, they would also be the mechanism for terminating the entire special preferential parking district.
Thank you.
Well, I think we'll go to public comment. I think a couple of headlines maybe for the speakers are, first of all, there will be no change on Windsor Road by virtue of this plan. There really won't be any change at all unless residents on a particular street petition for parking. So if you don't petition for preferential parking, there will be no change. And the other, I think, major thing that comes through is that the percentage for getting a parking on your street goes from 75 to 66%. I think those are sort of the major points. We have quite a few cards, so I'd like to limit comments to 3 minutes, if people don't mind, each. And our first speaker is Roland Doltz.
I've already shared what I needed to share earlier. The one question I have for the gentleman here is he says that the study's been done for 6 days out of the week, correct? For the permit parking. Have you taken in consideration that on Sundays you have one of the largest church in Glendale, which sits on Central, and it takes approximately like half a mile away from the church every available parking in the area. And you have this study done from Monday through Saturday. Have you taken in consideration that testing as well for Sundays? Because on Sunday there is no parking, zero, when that church is going. I'm telling you, it's a serious problem.
Thank you. Has staff considered Sundays? Maybe that's something we need to consider.
It did come up as part of the outreach. I believe there's 4 churches that were in the South Brand Special Preferential Parking District area, and that was one of the concerns that was brought up by the churches is the regulation on Sundays.
I mean, the churches didn't want it, obviously.
Correct.
Of course not.
Well, okay. Well, we can talk more about that later. If you have any more comments?
That's it.
Okay, thank you very much. Jean Brewer, 3 minutes, please. State your name.
I'm Jeannie Brewer. I'm the Acura dealer at 505 South Brand. Parking is so tough on South Brand, and it's so emotional. One of the things that primarily is my number one concern is that my customer has the ability to drive by Brand Boulevard, see a shiny, beautiful car, and be able to stop and park easily. That's my number one concern on Brand Boulevard. With the structure that has been presented tonight and that staff has come out and talked to us several times, and we appreciate that. One of the things that is probably the most concern to me is what happens to those residents that don't pay the $25, that don't pay for the parking permit. What's going to happen to Brand Boulevard as well as Central as well as Glendale? I think the impact on all of those businesses are really going to be affected as well. So is the program, are we just totally in favor of the program? Well, if it's the best compromise that we can come up with, then we're willing to work with it and to try it. But we still all have, of course, some great, great concerns. So we hesitantly are in favor of what everybody has worked so hard to do, because we have been working on it for a really long time. Is it perfect? No. But is it something that we can probably work around and work with? We'll do our very best. Thank you.
Thank you. Johnny Harrison. Three minutes, please. State your name.
Hello, Johnny Harrison. I'm Vice President, General Manager, Lexus of Glendale, and President of Brand Boulevard Cars. Sorry if my voice is cracking. I'm trying my best to fight a cold. I'd like to start off by saying that this has been quite a road that we've gone down. I'd like to personally say that, in my opinion, that the cities of Glendale are actually for everybody in Glendale. They're not for businesses, they're not for residents, they're across the board for everybody. So to actually say that this group or that group or something of that nature is penalized for some of a public street, I'm not really in favor for it. I don't really think it does well for us. Because if you're opening a business, you do your research, you take a look and see where you're going to be, where your parking is going to be, where your employees are going to be, where your customers are going to be. If you move to the area, you take a look at the area, you see where you're going to park, how you're going to move in, how you're going to load your truck, how you're going to get home, and where you're going to park. You do this all prior to coming to Glendale. So to say to the aspects that something is taking over the other, I don't think is really the right course of action. We've seen it on Windsor. Windsor is already there. It's great for the residents, but there's ample parking that's available right now that's not being utilized. That in turn makes both residents and businesses in the area move to another street, which of course compounds that street and that problem when there is ample parking available. So as we look at parking, which is always an issue, we have to keep in mind that we've got to make for sure that we keep business in line as it relates to being able to do business as business in Glendale. We need the tax revenue. I've heard somebody say the dollars and cents, but really when it comes down to it, we do need the funds for all of our city services as well as public schools. Everybody in here knows that I'm quite a supporter of public schools because of the aspect there's no dollars for those programs. So in turn, I think it's very important that we keep to business friendly in Glendale, and parking is a huge part of that. As I mentioned, I've been on this program. We've been looking for the last 2 years or so, looking to see this. I don't believe this is the best solution. I don't believe there's a winner in this, which means I applaud you. That means it's probably going to work because of the aspect, if you don't have one side or the other winning, it's usually a good overall mix. So even though, once again, I'm going to state we do not agree with it, but in turn, overviewing and looking at the full compromise, we've done a good job. So thank you.
You're welcome. A question on his point about if there's empty spots on Windsor, and I have no idea, could the non-residential permit program be applied to Windsor, or is Windsor completely hands-off for any change?
We've recommended that we leave Windsor hands-off, but that really is a decision that is up to the TPC.
He's saying everybody's unhappy, so that must be good news. Dennis DiPietro.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Dennis DiPietro, and I'm currently the chair of the board of the Glendale Chamber of Commerce. According to the December 6, 2011 staff report, and again this evening, quote, the South Brand Boulevard of Cars has been an important economic engine for the city of Glendale for over 85 years, providing tax revenue, jobs, and services. It's a little bit ironic, therefore, that cars and parking those automobiles should be the concern here with regard to this ordinance. Obviously, as a generalization, and certainly in South Brand, businesses need convenient parking for customers and staff. In the case of auto sales, just like Jeannie Brewer mentioned, customer spaces need to be both convenient, they need to be public, and they need to be free up until the time when a potential customer actually becomes hopefully an actual customer, in which case then those cars can be more controlled by the dealer. There have to be also some localized issues between businesses, and there have been some localized issues between businesses and residential, parking demands, and to a great extent, business owners have done a really admirable job in dealing with those issues. The increase in cars per household has created an increased demand on street parking. The Chamber of Commerce board has not taken a position yet on this specific ordinance, but as a generalization, supports mechanisms by which residential and commercial parking can be provided without the users of those spaces being at odds with one another, and therefore the community obviously benefits from a vibrant business and a strong relationship between businesses, residences, and the customers. So the Chamber of Commerce would ask that the Commission members please keep this very important relationship foremost in your minds as you analyze this draft ordinance. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Matsik Samodian. State your name in 3 minutes, please.
Good evening. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Commissioner, I am here to discuss about Windsor 200 block South West Windsor Street. Actually, all businesses which impacting Maple Street is impacting to Windsor Street also, the same businesses. And always Nissan dealer pushing us around. I believe gentleman who spoke about that we have only few parking spaces, only residential parking spaces, which is preferential. And I am here just to tell you that there is one parking space which eliminated, removed recently. Someone painted red. I believe, I'm just suspecting that this is a Nissan dealer did, and they are pushing us around, and shameful to them because they are just using their power, influencing city, do everything just because people cannot speak for themselves. Just that's why I am here to speak for these people. And I will ask you, please, I would like to find out if this is this red parking space removed privately or City of Glendale, Department of Transportation and Parking did that by request or Nissan dealer.
Well, maybe following the meeting, if you wouldn't mind, we can speak to one of the staff members, and they'll look into it. It's for you. So hold on to the photo, and following the meeting, speak to Mr. Golonian, or.
Actually, that is a very busy street, and I'm sure we have only few parking spaces, and they want to get all of them. I don't know why, Nissan dealer. And we have lots of businesses which also, for 2 hours, they come as visitors, they park, they leave. Just I'm asking you, just don't believe about the Windsor Square. Windsor Square is suffering because it's one way, just we have maybe 7 parking space for the residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin Shin. Did he leave?
Oh, he's right there.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Mr. Shin, 3 minutes, please.
My purpose was coming here is I didn't understand exactly how this parking permit, special permit, all that thing works. I'm an owner of the 20-unit apartment between Central and the Brand, and at least there are 20 people living there. So we need 20 space. We cannot ask or demand all everybody has a space around that area. But the thing is, Lexus, when I'm not really try to bad mouthing Lexus or anything. That was not my original intention. But it turned out the issue came over because the resident and the tenant in my apartment cannot find any parking space during the day because it's blanketed by most likely the employee of from the Lexus dealer. They promised when they built their building, they will make room for every employee in their building, 3-story building, and I'm pretty sure they are there. But thing is, how to enforce it is not a simple thing. Maybe Lexus dealer management may tell employee just park upstairs. There is a space available. But if employee don't listen, maybe that's where the problem coming from. So, as I said, how you make people, without the regulation background or anything, enforcement tool, do what I want to that happen. But but I didn't understand the whole thing because I saw all over the town, not just the Glendale. I'm in the southern part of Glendale. The northern part, everywhere you go, there's a 2-hour parking sign, and then so you cannot park on the same spot or on the same street more than 20 hours every day. So some people have it, some people don't. So I was wondering, what in the world, why we do not get the same equal the opportunity, get the 2-hour limit on our the street, so that our the tenant has at least the equal footing as far as the parking goes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hopefully this new plan will help address your issues. Margaret Hammond? 3 minutes, please.
Good evening again, commissioners, staff, audience. My name is Margaret Hammond. Pardon?
Continue.
I happen to own apartments on Louise Street. I go there all the time. The continual problem is, of course, parking. It has been, pardon me, for many years, and so I want to say, for instance, in this particular spot of where my apartments are, it's between Chestnut and Maple. The employees from the dealers park on Louise Street for hours. And therefore, the tenants do not, my tenants cannot, and other residents cannot get parking. Now, it happens to be 100,000 of Glendale's population, half of it, lives in the south end of Glendale. How do you like that, in that little part in the south? All the other 100,000 live away up into Chevy Chase, up into Montrose. No, our area down where I live on Adams Hill and Louise Street have 100,000 people in the area. Naturally, we have a lot of parking problems. As a matter of fact, within a block of my apartments, there are Holy Family, the church, the school, the elementary school. I'm not complaining about it. That's my church. So it's not a complaint. There is another church on the corner. Now, Holy Family does have some parking. There is a Korean church on the corner. They have no parking, but Holy Family shares their parking lot. Now, I don't think that it's fair that we should be continually over-parked, for instance, by the auto dealers for hours on end. And then there are even some of the residents on the street, and they have 3 and 4 cars. They don't even drive. They're there for days at a time until it's street cleaning or whatever. Then they move them. The other thing I would like to ask about, the discussion about $6 for the permits for the college, is it $6 still? That's the amount up there that they pay? Is that the amount that they pay up there? I'm asking. Well, then why should we have to pay $25 in our area? Our area is low-income area. We have people that are in those apartments. They're not high-priced apartments, you know. I mean, they're lower income altogether, and you're going to charge them, what, 4 times the amount, 5 times the amount for parking permits? I don't think that's fair. If it's fair for what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And the other thing being, there's no reason that, all right, you have 24 hours, 7 permits. I think you said on Windsor Street, which is fine. I would like to see the same thing on Louise Street, and also some speed bumps on Louise Street. It's a raceway up and down Louise. They avoid Brand and come over onto Louise Street.
Thank you very much. Mike Mohill.
Good evening, Commissioners, Chairman. My name is Mike Mohill. I got involved with this issue about 2 weeks ago when I met Roland Doles. He complained about parking on Maple Street. And I asked him about it. And what's the issue? And why are you at City Council? He says, it's a nightmare where I live. Parking, parking, parking. There's just no parking. The City Council, the Planning Department planned to fail. And today, we are suffering from it. We planned businesses on Brand with insufficient parking. It's the problem of basically South Glendale by the Planning Department, the Transportation Department, the City Council, up and down government. Now, Mr. Doles says to me this evening, this issue about parking is complicated. He's right about that one. For all the parties concerned, we have absentee landlords and transient residents who are generally afraid of government, and they don't even want to speak with anybody about the problem of parking. Multiple housing with continued insufficient parking dating back to the 1970s and 80s, and we haven't changed that issue at all. In fact, they want to squeeze in more housing in South Glendale, from what I read in the papers recently. Permit parking. Mr. Doles says to me, Mike, We need permit parking 24/7, not just certain hours, because if it isn't this business, it's that business, and on Sunday it's the church. When do I get some reprieve? I live here. This is my home. You know, people complaining about where they live, they want their quality of life. Where is this man's quality of life? Perhaps we need a public parking structure in that area to be financed by the businesses, the residents, the landlords. The renters are looking for affordable housing. Who's got the money, who's paying for it, and who's getting the deals is the bottom line here. The people in South Glendale, I think they've had enough. You are commissioners here, and this man came here with an issue of parking. He's just one man, because he lives there. He is not a renter. He lives there 24/7. How would you feel having no parking in your neighborhood? I'm fortunate. I live in a nice area. I have plenty of parking in my area. But who speaks for the people of South Glendale? I'm looking for an answer tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final speaker I have a card for is Razmik Grigorian. 3 minutes, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and honorable commissioners and hardworking city staff. My name is Razmik Grigorian. I'm sure you remember me. I've been here before you many times before. And regarding this parking situation, especially on Windsor Road. First of all, I commend the staff for their hard work and this report that they have prepared. It is very comprehensive. It includes a lot of things. Some of the work might be a work in progress because it's all in theory and on paper. Maybe in practice we might have to adjust here and there. But I really, really thank, first of all, you honorable gentlemen and the lady who was here before for granting Windsor the preferential parking that it enjoys today. After that, I own a building on Windsor Road, and all this talk about Windsor Road, the only section of Windsor Road which is granted this preferential parking is hardly even 500 feet. It is a section of the 200 and a section of the 300 block. That has eased the problem so much for all the residents that now I don't even have vacancy in my building. Before, I used to have 2 or 3 vacant units just because people would not even want to check at those beautiful units because of the parking situation. So that has created it has allowed us to breathe and do our business, a small business, as we should. And the problem with the whole South Brand area is that some of the major dealerships that have a lot of parking spaces on their own premises, they don't allow their employees to park in there, and they push their employees to park in the streets because they want to put their inventories in there. And again, I appreciate those businesses. I love all those cars. They bring a lot of good business and a lot of good tax dollars to the city. So there is no question about it. But I don't think just because they bring all those tax dollars, they have the right to stomp on the little people, on the residents, and on the small business owners and the small building owners like myself. So I think one of the important things that this commission should consider is also trying to enforce the parking regulations not only on the streets but also on the businesses, and see how they, with all those major parking spaces that they have for their businesses, how they are implementing it. And I know the time is running, so one other thing is on the 2-hour parking, how is that going to be enforced? I have observed quite often that cars are parked in there several hours without any enforcement. And also, it seems to me, after Mercedes-Benz has expanded, this problem, although on Windsor Road, is solved, and we thank you, but it seems that 700 block of South Louis and 700 and 800 blocks of South Maryland have still major problems. So hopefully they will be also granted the privilege that Windsor Road was granted, and the rest of the parking situations, hopefully with this new regulations, we will see how it works, and if it needs to be modified, then hopefully we will modify it. Thank you.
Thank you. One more card, John Thomas. 3 minutes, please.
Good evening, John Travis.
Travis, I'm sorry.
That's all right. I wanted to echo Mr. Gregorian's comments about Windsor. It has really helped, and I want to commend everyone for supporting the previous staff report. Another thing that it's done is it has forced BMW, which has been our only problem. We have no retail customer problems. Nearly 100% of the businesses by us have dedicated parking spots, so that's not an issue. It was BMW. They have granted some parking to employees, but not all. But at least it's changed some things there, and it really has been a big help. The guest pass situation is a new problem, and I love this idea of the 30-day daily pass. We have a lot of people that will park on the street for weeks at a time, only changing, as the lady said, for street cleaning. And they will use guest passes as permanent passes. And the problem is enforcement has been pretty weak as far as guest passes. Each pass has a serial number. That guest pass is traced to the owner or the legitimate pass. So with diligent enforcement, those people would be either given some citation, which I believe is in the codes, or not. But it's left to go pretty much. If you have a guest pass, you can park there. And we have seen some guest passes that have been either sold or given to people that are not on the street, that park on the street. I'm only talking about the preferential street of Windsor, which is less than about 50 parking spots. So that's been a bit of a problem. And also, as far as even people that don't properly display their passes, which is the law, is not being enforced enough. $25 is pretty steep from $6 in a mathematical sense. But I'm sure that for the guest passes, the addition after 30 of paying would be certainly worth it to take the people that are using it all the time off the street. So I really recommend that a lot. Windsor seems to be kind of the epicenter for all this. We have Lexus talking about Windsor, and they're 4 or 5 quarter of a mile away from us, so it's not even an issue. And so, believe me, I've been here many times and heard it all. And I really want to again thank you and really ask for your continued support in the grandfathering of Windsor. It has made a difference, and it's made the businesses also react and work with their own employees. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll close the public hearing. Any comments from our commissioners? Did you have anything? Okay, go ahead, Bill.
Okay, I'll go ahead and start. We've been working on this for a while. I think it's been a long time coming, since 2009, 2010. We've been making moves in this direction. I'm in general supportive of recommending the draft ordinance for approval by the City Council. I'm glad to see that staff has addressed the issues that we brought up regarding abuse of the permit system, and some of the speakers have alluded to that tonight as well, especially in the area of guest permits. And there's sort of another underlying theme mentioned by several speakers that I think is very important, and that is the issue of enforcement. I wish I had a magic wand that I could wave that would guarantee, we'd be able to have a higher level of enforcement once this goes into effect. Short of having a magic wand, I think probably the next best thing we can do is, if my colleagues agree, when we do send this on to the City Council, it be sent with a strong recommendation for them to consider the issue of enforcement and the issue of what resources can be brought to bear to enforce this. I'm glad also that There's been discussion of the issue of home health care workers and caregivers, and that we have, evidently, your research indicates that there's not too big of an issue there, but at least for those people that do have that, it sounds like we'll be able to accommodate them properly. I did want to mention, also bring up the issue that Margaret Hammond mentioned about the charges, since we're going to be going into this program recommending a $25 charge per permit. In terms of the existing district for Glendale College, what would it take to bring their permit fees in line with the new permit? Would that require an ordinance change, or is that something that can be done administratively? Because it does seem to be a bit of a fairness issue in terms of some people getting charged a lot more money than other people.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Wiseman, it's our intention to bring the item to City Council for consideration, at least, with the citywide fee ordinance that's going to come in front of them in several months from now. So I think that will be the best forum for them to discuss and consider.
Okay, but this is something that is on your plate for bringing to them
yes.
When that time comes.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Well, as I said, I will support recommending this for the City Council. The only other item I would mention is I'm also well aware of the economic contributions that are made to this city by the car dealers on Brand. I would also note, as Mr. Gregorian I'm sure well remembers, that in the environmental documents for when those dealerships were developed, and I'm not calling out anyone specifically here because I'm not sure exactly who may have this and who may not, but a lot of the mitigations on the environmental documents require that dealerships provide parking for 100% of their employees. And I think that when that doesn't happen for whatever reason, this is partially the result that will be seen, which is the residents coming to their city government and asking for that situation to be redressed. So I think this will accomplish that as well, and looking forward to voting in favor of this. Thank you.
Mr. Sahakian?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's not a perfect plan, and it's not a secret, and we'll never have a perfect plan. Unfortunately, back in the 90s, we approved, we built. We waived requirements like crazy. One of them was parking requirements, and we keep doing it, unfortunately. It doesn't work that way, and it's never going to work that way. But we have a situation where we need to have the businesses and the residents live together, and they both need to survive. It's as simple as that. Going back to my fellow commissioner, as far as parking, employees, dealerships providing parking for their employees, that's good if we had a normal situation. We need to go above and beyond that. I've suggested this before, and I'm going to suggest it again. Dealerships should make space on their properties for their customers by taking their employees, putting them in city parking structures, and having a van pool system or a transit system, mass transit system, to the city lots. Up and down Brand Boulevard, you have 40, 50 employees, that's 40, 50 spaces on your dealership property that you can use for your customers. So we need to think outside the box. I brought this up many times, and I haven't heard any feedback. A couple of other issues. Now, the $6 versus $25, I'm also concerned. I understand if it's $6 now for the college, we're not going to go back and ask for $19, but for next year, that should change. Everybody should pay the same. We shouldn't have a double standard here for people living in different areas. As far as enforcement, unfortunately, in these economic times, if you need to establish a new program, it needs to pay for itself. And it's manpower. It's as simple as that. We don't have enough people, enough meter maids or police officers going around and enforcing this. Now, if you had a couple of people dedicated to enforcement and the enforcement process will pay for their salaries, that's something that council should look into, and maybe we can do that. Otherwise, a police officer is going to respond to burglary and not to write a parking ticket. And believe me, every street has a parking issue in Glendale. It's not a secret. I'm also going to support the plan. I commend my colleagues for working on it. I commend the dealerships for working on it, the public, the hearings, staff. Again, it's not a perfect plan. It's a start. We can always look at it and modify things. And that's my position on it for now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Do you have any further comments?
Yeah, I'd like to echo Commissioner Sahakian, but, we can work on it and make it perfect. I have a few questions. They were not clear to me. Before I make a decision, I like, for non-resident permits. These are annual permits or one-time use permits? I didn't understand that concept.
They would be annual permits.
Annual, and it's based on your studies to see how much or how many spaces you have available. Then those based on those spaces, you will issue permits to the businesses.
Correct. Once the preferential parking is installed and we can see what the use is on the street and wait a certain amount of time for it to adjust, we'll see if it's underutilized now, if a lot of the long-term parking, and it could be residents who had multiple vehicles, they got rid of their vehicles. It could be businesses and employees in the area who shifted over and moved to a different street or found a different solution. Once we see what that is, then we can look at see how utilized the street is. If there's excess parking capacity at that time, then we would allow some of the businesses who would be requesting the permits, if there are any, to come back and park on the underutilized streets.
Thank you. Since 2010, we've been working on this one. Can you tell me how many petitions you have received so far from businesses or the residents?
I know we've received at least a couple. Back in 2011, I believe, it may have been 2010, when this process was first initiated, the council put any future petitions, the implementation of any future petitions on hold up until we bring this package back to them and adopt a comprehensive plan. So right now, we do have at least one petition, I believe two, that we've received for that area that are on hold until we get this process dealt with.
And what was the issue then, that the council put this on hold and we didn't go through? There were issues?
It was a comprehensive look at the entire parking program as well as some zoning changes that were all happening in that same area.
Throughout the city, or just that 8 zones that you were talking about?
Specifically in the South Brand area.
And what are the plans for the whole city? Do you have any plans for the whole city? Citywide study?
As far as preferential parking?
Yes, that's what we're talking about, yeah.
Not currently, no.
No issues in the other parts of the city?
We do have issues in other areas, but I don't know that any of the areas, just like I said earlier, the college, we definitely had, 20 years ago, we had a problem at the college area. We isolated it, we knew where it was and identified it and put a program in place. I think this is the next area where we've seen, historically, we've seen challenges with parking down in this area for decades. And I think this was the next area that we needed to look at, do some comprehensive studies, do lots of outreach, really come up with a comprehensive program to address some of the issues.
Because my concern is always if we make a decision based on what we have in front of you and what the speakers are talking about, then 2-3 months, a year later, some other commissioners will be sitting here and they're going to address different issues and then they're going to go back and because, if we've been tackling this problem since 2010, we should have a clear path at this time. That's my understanding. But that's just my opinion. We should not be at this junction after 3 years of study. I like to support this, as my commissioners stated that, but the issue that is, I have this reservation, if you are an owner of a 6-unit apartment and there are 18 people or 20 people living in that unit. Doesn't constitute that you have to have 20 spaces available in front of your house to park. That's always my concern. There should be some parkings. If we haven't allowed ample parking or enough parking for the residents, we failed. So now we have to make it a little bit more just for everybody. I like what the last speaker said about Windsor. Last time, I think it's a good model. I like to support it just based on what I heard from the residents today. But I would have made a better decision if I had a better report from the staff. Thank you.
Thank you. I should mention we received a number of emails which are part of the record and which we, the commissioners, have read. They seem to generally echo what's been spoken tonight. A couple of people from Windsor Road, and hopefully by saying Windsor doesn't change, over our dead body, that will make some people more comfortable. I guess on the enforcement issue, I understand staff issues, but I guess if somebody sees cars and if somebody complains, that will drive somebody to go out there and look at it. And so it's a complaint-driven enforcement system, probably in large part. So if anybody sees an abuse, please call the city, and that would probably be the most efficient way of dealing with it. I echo my colleagues' comments. I think that it's a compromise. Not everybody's happy. That's probably a good thing. A lot of work has gone into this, and I think from what I've heard from the comments tonight, I think this addresses most of the issues that were raised in some form or fashion, and so hopefully this will work. If it doesn't, council, and we can go back, later and fine-tune it. But I think this is an excellent work after 2 years' work. I think it's a good job, and I'm inclined to support it as well. So with no further comments, shall we call for a motion? Or
before a motion, Mr. Chair, we have emails. Do you want to go?
Well, I didn't think we needed to read all of them. I just mentioned, I think they tend to echo what was said in the audience today. There was one or two were from people in Windsor, and I think we've said that won't change. Another person sort of seemed to support preferential parking, which is what we're doing tonight.
This was given to us right before the meeting.
Yeah, and I think we all read it.
Word for it.
Yeah, no, well, I read it. Hopefully you read it. And it is part of, I confirmed with the attorney, it's part of the record, so we in a sense heard you. Do I hear a motion?
Hey, I will move that the Transportation and Parking Commission recommend the proposed draft ordinance to the City Council, which amends Glendale Municipal Code Title 10.36 for preferential parking, along with a recommendation that they take a close look at the resources required for enforcement, as that will be a key success indicator.
A second.
Roll call?
Commissioner Weissman?
Yes.
Commissioner Sahakian?
Yes.
Commissioner Mangasarian?
Yes.
Chairperson Fuad?
Yes. So we have a recommendation to council to implement this preferential parking. Thank you all. Do we have any comments from staff or commissioners?
Next item, Mr. Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry. Next item. Sorry.
We're on item 6, right?
Yes, we're going to item 6.
Last time I asked for a report on the city's program on the projects. I don't know where we are. I'm not asking why not. It's not here, but do we have any timeline for that?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Commissioner Mangasarian, as you heard last time, we have been in the process of transition, transportation, traffic and transportation during the engineering division. So that has taken some of our efforts in trying to streamline our process and combine our efforts. But we are working on that report that you had requested, and it's my hope that if not the next meeting, definitely the following meeting will be presented to the Commission.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have one item, and I'm not sure what's the status on it. About 6 months ago, I brought up the issue of mountain at 2 freeway, the on-ramp, the northbound on-ramp. What happens is people don't wait, they go straight, make a U-turn, just south of, I should say, just east of the raised median island, and then they get on the on the freeway, and there's a visibility issue there for westbound traffic coming from the hill. It's a curve, so there's a sight distance visibility issue. And about 2 days ago, I almost witnessed a crash. Usually it's AM rush hour time when I'm observing this. I'm sure it happens other times too. Last I spoke with John when he was with us, he said we were discussing it with Caltrans. If I can get an answer on that in the near future, that'll be great. And it's a safety issue at this point more than anything else. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other commission comments? Any staff comments? Well, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you.
Thank you.